Now, usually I don't do this, but go ahead on break them off with a little previews of the remix.
So now we get into the more plot-centered arcs of Digimon Tamers, as the kids now enter the digital world. A quick recap of the events leading up to this. Yamaki, the main villain of the first arc, tried to wipe out all Digimon using his genocidal death ray, which backfired and weakened the barrier between the real and digital world, causing these godlike Digimon, I guess, called Devas, who are servants of this all-powerful Digimon called the Sovereign. It allowed the Devas to invade the human world. Jerry got herself a Digimon partner in the form of Leomon. Impmon is seeking the help of a glowing bright light to make him more powerful. Yamaki tries his super death ray again, and it makes everything worse again. And apparently Calamon is the secret key to evolution. So one of the Devas kidnaps him, takes him back to the digital world. And now our heroes are off to the digital world with the help of Yamaki to go rescue Calamon and see if they can reason with the Digimon Sovereign and try to stop him from destroying the human world. Okay, so our heroes are off on their little adventure to the digital world through a portal that Kiyomon just randomly found digging in the ground. Okay. So our heroes enter the portal and they start walking, I guess, in between the planes to the digital world. And this is a really kind of cool visual scene. It's very bright and it's kind of, it's got this kind of interesting concept where like they all of a sudden start floating because of the fact that the perceptions of reality no longer exist or something. Anyway, because they're just floating because up and down has not been established to them. So gravity doesn't have any effect. And then there's this kind of funny scene where Jerry just says, well, I think this way's down. And then they all start plummeting. Yeah, it's a pretty funny scene. I think it's pretty cool. And it's actually pretty important because up until about like the tail end of this arc, that's the best scene we're gonna get for a while. Seriously, this arc is, for the most part, just terrible. Like, it's just usually just so annoying. And when it's not being annoying, it's being incredibly boring. Okay, so for the first episode here, we're mainly just learning about how the digital world works, because it works very differently to how it's worked in the past. Because apparently the digital world is even more of a wasteland than it was in Adventure in 02, and it's got these packets of old data that work kind of like tumbleweeds. But most importantly, you got this giant orb, which is just floating above the digital world, and I forgot if that's supposed to represent Earth or not. But it has these bright beams that shoot down to the digital world. And if you get caught in the bright beams, then you get teleported to a random spot in the digital world. So watch out for those. They also learn that technology doesn't work here, which makes them very worried about how they're going to get back. Because Yamaki gave them a communicator to try to help them like find their way back or something. But it doesn't work. So now they're completely stranded here, with like no way of telling anybody where they are or any way to communicate with them to try to figure out a way back. No, they are just completely on their own. Also, Calamon manages to escape the Monkey Deva, so now he's wandering off on his own with the Monkey Deva looking for him. So that's what we learned in the first episode of the second arc. Also, there's a slight case of murder, but we'll just ignore that. This episode does end on a cliffhanger. Because remember that beam I told you about that teleports somebody that gets sucked into it to any part of the digital world? That starts barreling towards our heroes, and all the members of our gang manage to jump out of the way of the beam, except for Kenta and Kazu, who instead of jumping out of the way of the laser, decide to keep running in the path of the laser. And Rika, ignoring every logical and sane urge to just let these two get hit by the beam and therefore teleported out of her life, decides to go and try to save them. And the episode ends with, does Rika manage to save Kenta and Kazu before getting hit by the teleportation beam? Or do they get sent to the far edges of the digital world where they may never see their friends or family ever again? Spoilers, they get hit by the teleportation beam. And this segues into the absolute worst episode this series ever had. Now you may be thinking, oh, the worst episode? That's a mighty big statement to make. What about that episode in Data Squad where Thomas has to take Chrissy on a birthday adventure? No, this is worse. Well, how about that episode in Adventure where Mimi becomes a princess? No, this is still worse. Well, what about that episode in Frontier where Tommy has to make... Nope. Well, how about that part in 02 where... Nope. What about that thing in Crosswords you complained about where a car... No. Well, how about that episode in Hunters where... No, this is... I will say this right now. This is worse than any single episode in Hunters. You can mention any episode in that season, and I would say I would rather watch it again than this episode. Why is this episode so awful? Well, first off, it is pretty much a love song to Kenta and Kazu and their shtick. Now, what is Kenta and Kazu's shtick? Here's a little taste.
How are we supposed to go home?
Yeah, right.
And don't yell at us like you're our teacher or something.
Yeah, right.
Although, you know, I wouldn't mind having a teacher as pretty as you.
Huh? What are you talking about, Kazu? Yell at her for yelling at us.
I wouldn't talk to me like that if I were you.
Why not?
Because otherwise I might feel sorely tempted to tell Rika here a little story about how we took our physicals in gym class. And you couldn't even do one single pull-up.
Okay, I'm sorry.
And that's the entire episode, basically. And this episode doesn't even have like a cool fight scene it can fall back on. Like, oh yeah, this part was crap, but at least it had a cool fight scene. It doesn't have that. Because guess what? The one fight scene this episode has is between Kenta and Kazu while they do their shtick. Now this episode starts off with Rika rightfully pointing out to Kenta and Kazu that if it wasn't for them, they wouldn't be completely lost in the digital world and separated from their friends. And she also rightfully points out that they are completely useless and annoying. And then Renamon gets all upset saying, Rika, how can you say that to your friends? And Rika just goes, fine, I'll try to be nicer to them, I guess. And for a second it seems like it's going to be a Rika episode. But it turns out it's not, because the wind starts picking up, and Rika, Kenta, and Kazu have to go take shelter in the home of these Digimon, who are equally as annoying as Kenta and Kazu. And that's pretty much the entire episode. These four just doing god-awfully annoying things for the entire episode. And what's Rika doing? Oh, just nothing too important. Just trying to figure out how to use the air currents to build a kite, which she hopes will allow them to escape this canyon, and thus hopefully reunite with the rest of the group so that we can actually have a story that involves all the characters together, and possibly rescue Calamon. But the big drama for this episode comes when Kenta and Kazu decide they want these two old Digimon to be their Digimon partners, so that then they could be Digimon Tamers just like Takato, Henry, and Rika and Jerry. So they tell Rika to go on ahead, and they'll try to catch up later while they try to figure this whole Digimon Tamer thing out. And there are two nice things I can say about this episode. Rika just seems like she is on board with leaving them behind. And even Renamon's like, shouldn't we, like, you know, try to stick together or something? And Rika's just like, no. If these idiots want to be left behind, we will leave them behind. Let's go. Let's go save Calamon. It's the best. But yeah, then it leads to Kenta and Kazu doing a fake fight scene with each other. And then Rika just walks in and points out they look like retards and they should go. And then these two Digimon just say, oh no, stay here. And then Renamon beats them up so they could leave. And yeah, they fly away on this kite, with Rika once again rightfully pointing out how stupid everybody was acting. And that is the end of the worst Digimon episode ever. The other good thing I can say about this episode is it didn't go the direction I thought it was going to go with Rika, which was to have the big moral of the story was she needs to lighten up and learn how to joke around with Kenta and Kazu and, you know, learn to be a little silly herself, you know, try to have Kenta and Kazu develop her character that way and try to make her more like them. No, she didn't do that. She just continuously pointed out how retarded everything was. And this is actually the episode that made Rika my favorite character in the series, because I was just sitting there nodding in agreement the whole time whenever she'd let loose on these two assholes, because I just couldn't stand them. And she was channeling my frustration. So, good for her. Also, one more note, if Digimon and Babamon, these two Digimon, did actually become Kenta and Kazu's Digimon partners, I would not have been able to finish this series, because we're only 25 episodes in, there's about 25 episodes left, and just 25 episodes of these four going back and forth with each other would have just turned me off to the entire series. So that's another good mark I guess I could give this episode, but still terrible. But it does give us a little accurate window about what we're going to be dealing with for the next couple episodes. Annoying, obnoxious little misadventures, dealing with annoying, obnoxious Digimon.